You're about to watch what we call an extended clip of the Young Turks, and the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. It's a little longer than our YouTube clips, but it's actually shorter than the whole 2-hour show, which you can get if you're a member. You can get it ad-free, and make sure you catch every news story we do that day. You're gonna love it as a full show. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the Young Turks. We have an amazing show for you guys today. I'm back. I had a vacation. We'll talk about that in the postgame a little bit. I went to Jamaica. Was I well received as Mr. Jamaica in my native land? I'll tell you all about it. tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and hear that postgame. Did I get someone to call me actually Mr. Jamaica? Did anyone know there that I was actually Mr. Jamaica? All right, we'll find out in the postgame. Anyway, that's fun for later. Today's show is both got a lot of fun stories and a lot of tragic stories. Again, it's the news. That's kind of what happens. And certainly on the Young Turks. So we're going to start out with a couple of funny ones in the first segment, but later on we're going to get more serious. The Sinclair Broadcasting story is amazing. It's a wonderful and horrific demonstration of propaganda. Hold, okay, excuse me, it's a live show. And then speaking of tragic, no, seriously, the last story in the first hour for you guys is about Gaza. I don't want you to miss that because what's happening there right now is both deeply troubling, but also really important because I think we might be at a strategy that could actually work to get peace in the Middle East. I'm among the very few people who hold that point of view, but I want to give you all the facts and then give you my perspective on that a little bit later in the program. So giant show ahead. Let's go do some of the fun stories first. Okay. Congratulations, America. You have a new challenge on YouTube. Some of these could be incredibly positive. The Ice Bucket Challenge raised millions upon millions of dollars for charity. This one is not in that category. This is apparently a challenge related to condoms. There's no way this story ends well. So let's get started. First of all, the Sacramento Bee writing here. Educators are warning about a condom challenge being spread online by YouTube videos and social media. When educators are warning about something, okay, that involves condoms, watch out. All right, so I was thinking, condom challenge, what are they gonna do with it? Uh-oh. All right, here we go, buckle up, brace for impact. Also known as the, quote, Snorting condom challenge, or condom snorting challenge. Wow, that is very different how you phrase those two things. Anyway, the fad actually dates back several years, but has recently gone viral again, educators say. Thrilling. An idea as bad as condom snorting has gone viral again. All right, now a different condom challenge, they explain, made the rounds back in 2015, involving videos of water-filled condoms being dropped on people's heads, drenching them, reported the debrief. Okay, have your pick of disastrous condom challenge ideas. Can you imagine having a condom filled with water dropped on your head? How that didn't lead to several shootings in America, I will never know, and thank God for that everybody was okay. But that's a terrible idea, only matched by an even worse idea, which is this condom snorting thing. Now, different news stories have this dating back to 2013 and some as early as 2007. YouTube has been trying to delete a lot of those videos because they are in fact a dangerous idea. But nonetheless, let me give you more important context on this story. The challenge involves snorting an unwrapped condom up one nostril, we're already having fun, then pulling the condom from the throat out the mouth, reported Newsweek. Participants typically then post a video of the completed challenge to YouTube. Well, of course, if you don't show people yourself snorting condoms on YouTube, did it really happen? Okay, you already lost me on the snorting part, but when it goes through the throat and that plastic can get stuck, that seems like a particularly bad idea. Okay. But they have to clarify, so the Sacramento Bee says, snorting a condom up your nose not only poses a choking hazard, but also puts you at risk for allergic reactions and infections, reports Forbes. Forbes had to report that. I think that anybody with any degree of sense can tell that if you snort a condom through your nose and out your mouth, it could get stuck in your throat and pose a choking hazard. I'm less worried about the allergies, but if you've got condom allergies, I wouldn't snort it. Okay. They then further bothered to ask an expert, Bruce Lee. Yes, his name is actually Bruce Lee. And this guy's a professor. Okay, they went and talked to a professor. Anyway, even if you manage to successfully pull the condom out through your mouth, inhaling a condom up your nose would be very uncomfortable and potentially quite painful. Yes, as I said earlier, he is a professor. I love his last line here. He says, would it really be worth all that just to get more likes and views? And the resounding answer to that by the world was yes. Okay, now I disagree. I don't think that's the right way to get views. And we did once do a Harlem Shake on the Young Turks. We will not be snorting any condoms here. I think that is a disastrous idea. As I guess the oldest partner of YouTube here at the Young Turks, it is my job as Grandpa Jenk to say, get off my lawn. In other words, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. You can get really hurt. And no, it is not worth the likes and views, although apparently children across America disagree. Okay, that's just a fun little story about culture to get started with. Now we go to a fun little story about Donald Trump. Oh boy, buckle up and brace for impact on this one too. Okay, here we go. Now, Donald Trump was celebrating Easter at the White House, or whatever this building is, as you're about to find out. And as usual, the Easter Bunny's next to him. That's never not funny. Let's show a picture. This is always my favorite sight. And the Easter Bunny looks funny as always, creepy as always. It always makes the president look ridiculous to stand next to an Easter Bunny. It is not one of my favorite traditions at the White House. If I was a president, which is unlikely to happen, so you're going to be okay, Easter Bunny, I would ban that tradition. They say, would you like to stand next to the Easter Bunny? The answer is a resounding no. By the way, earlier in his career, the former White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, played an Easter Bunny in one of those ceremonies. That's only the most embarrassing thing I've ever heard. Okay, never play an Easter Bunny unless you're a furry. So, now how is Donald Trump going to match all the other presidents and top them? Because all the presidents have to stand next to this ridiculous Easter Bunny. Donald Trump says, you will not out-ridiculous me. I'm going to go further here and do better than you. So now understand that on the lawn are children. They're about to do the Easter egg roll and the hunt and all that fun stuff. He's talking to a bunch of kids. And then he starts talking about the military. What? No, different venue, not this venue. And it appears even the Easter Bunny's a little surprised. Let's watch.
This is a special year. Our country is doing great. You look at the economy, you look at what's happening. Nothing's ever easy, but we have never had an economy like we have right now. And we're going to make it bigger and better and stronger. Our military is now at a level, will soon be at a level that it's never been before. It's, you see what's happening, and you see what's happening with funding. The funding of our military was so important, and so many military people are with us today. So just think of $700 billion, because that's all going into our military this year.
All right, we might have added the zoom in to the Easter Bunny, but I think it was well merited. He always does have a surprised look on his face. But we were all surprised when Donald Trump started going into this weird political speech. But it only gets worse. That was weird in terms of policy and the wrong venue to bring that topic up. But then he says this.
I want to thank the White House Historical Association and all of the people that worked so hard with Melania, with everybody to keep this incredible house or building or whatever you want to call it, because there really is no name for it. It is special.
It's called the White House. It definitely has a name, a fairly well-known name. You live inside it. This building, whatever it's called, that's unbelievable. No, the guy's lost his mind. We're all pretending that everything's fine. This thing, whatever you call it, it looks white, looks to be some sort of a house. I don't know. I watched Fox Inside in there, but God knows what it is. He's not done. One more.
And we keep it in tip-top shape. We call it sometimes tippy-top shape. And it's a great, great place.
We sometimes call it a tippy-top shape. Is that what we call it at the adult White House? He then added, I said tip-top, tippy to the tippy, the tip at top, and you don't stop, a rocket out, bubba to the bang bang boogie, boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to the beat. He said it, I don't know. Well, the guy is an absolute disaster, but at least he made Easter slightly more fun. Okay. Yeah, I had to look down to read it. Okay, all right. I told you the show was going to start fun. Didn't I tell you that? All right, now let's go to another fun story. And here I will randomly tell Jesus, our director, something. We're going to go, we'll add video 6 in here, Jesus, after graphic 11. Okay, so I just said that. All right, here we go. You know, the VA secretary used to be this guy named Shulkin, and he's been fired or resigned or fired, depending on what Donald Trump is thinking at this particular moment. Now, on Saturday, the White House spokesperson, Lindsay Walters, put out a statement saying Secretary Shulkin resigned from his position as Secretary of the Department of Veteran Affairs. Now, wait a minute, that's not the story we heard before. We heard he was fired, and it seemed fairly definitive. But now over the weekend, they're saying he resigned. Interesting. So they asked Shulkin about it. They have him on television. And he says, I came to fight for our veterans, and I had no intention of giving up. There would be no reason for me to resign. Now, you don't often get a guy say, no, I was definitely fired. I don't want any confusion about this. I did not resign, I was fired. But of course you have to correct the president because he's saying things that aren't true. Shulkin didn't say, you know what, I don't like this Veterans Affairs job, I just want to quit. No, he was fired by Trump for, some would say legitimate reasons, some would say preposterous reasons. But is there anything that Trump does that isn't for preposterous reasons? So HuffPost has some clarification here. Shulkin said that the chief of staff, John Kelly, told him he'd been terminated, quote, shortly before Trump tweeted about it on Wednesday, adding that he neither offered his resignation nor submitted a letter of resignation. He said his dismissal was somewhat of a surprise since, quote, President Trump and I actually spoke the day that he sent the tweet out just a few hours before. Look, this is what I want to drive home to you guys. Even the president doesn't know what the president thinks. It changes minute by minute. He has no principles, he has no convictions, he doesn't even have any ideas. Things pop into his head depending on whoever's last in the room or depending on the last segment on Fox and Friends. So does he think that he fired Shulkin or does he think Shulkin resigned? I don't know. Ask him right now, ask him a minute later, ask him a minute later after that, and you'll have 3 different answers. The guy's a pathological liar. He cannot help himself. And he constantly gets his staff into trouble because he tells them things like, well, tell everybody he resigned. Go ahead, tell him that he resigned, okay? I didn't fire him, no. And they're like, all right, okay, I saw you fire him, but all right, whatever, he resigned, right? And then later they're like, don't you feel like I fired him? That guy was a loser. I'm tired of winning, so I needed more winners, right? So we're gonna get to the last flip-flop in a second, but I wanna show you Shulkin on TV.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Were you fired or did you resign?
Well, I came to Washington with the commitment to make our system work better for veterans. That's the commitment that I went to work every day. I continue to feel strongly about that. There was no reason why I would resign.
So why don't you just say you were fired?
Well, I think that's the alternative to resignation. I received a phone call saying that the president wanted to make a change, and that's certainly his prerogative to do that, and that's what happened.
You received a phone call from Chief of Staff John Kelly, who fired you.
General Kelly gave me a heads up that the president would most likely be tweeting out a message in the very near future, and I appreciated having that heads up from General Kelly.
So the tweet fired you?
Yes.
This is the world we live in. But that's okay, because the White House said that he was not fired until today. We go back to HuffPost. The White House on Monday changed its story about David Shulkin's departure from the Department of Veterans Affairs, acknowledging he didn't voluntarily quit. There is a deeply unstable, pathological liar in the White House. No one has any idea what he's going to do, including himself. So any article you see, any pundit you see that tells you about Donald Trump's theory on this or his hypothesis on that or his strategy on something else, understand they have no idea what they're talking about. There is no strategy. It's just a deeply unstable man stabbing in the darkness, trying to figure out what's going on. I fired him, you resigned, fired. And that guy is at the wheel. God help us all. All right, when we come back, that was actually the lighthearted stuff. We will have really important stories about the people doing propaganda for the president, and then both the tragic, and I would argue, and I'm again probably the only person arguing this, hopeful story about what is happening in the Gaza Strip and what it could mean for either further conflict or maybe even peace in the Middle East. We'll talk about that when we come back. Thanks for listening to this podcast. You're only halfway through, so hold, stay right here. Just want to remind you, if you want to get all 5 segments of the Young Turks commercial free, these are just 2 of them. Every day we do it. So go to tytnetwork.com/join and you get the whole 5 segments, 2 hours, ad free. Do it now. All right, back on the Young Turks. Just time for 2 tweets for you guys. Actually, one's YouTube super chat. Kimberly Buckley says, "Welcome back, Cenk. We've missed you. Thank you. I appreciate that." I'll add one more tweet here. Joy Division says, "Trump is definitely showing the early signs of dementia." Look, man, I think he might have been that ridiculous and dumb all along, but I hear you on that. And I just want to say, Null Cookies wrote in, "I love Dan Rather." Thank you for that. Dan Rather's, of course, got the show before us on Mondays on the TYT network at 5:30 Eastern. So make sure you're checking that out every Monday. Okay, let's go over here and do some serious stories. Okay. Sinclair Broadcast Group is a right-leaning group, to say the least. It owns the most amount of television stations in America. And they recently put out a memo to their staff saying, you must read well, of course, they didn't call it propaganda, but that is exactly what it is, as you'll see in a minute. The news stories that we give you, now these stories almost all support Donald Trump and his politics. And in this one particular case, they actually talk about fake news, or what they're calling fake stories. And they're trying to say that the rest of the media is biased. Now, they're getting the media to devour itself, They are forcing their local news anchors, and these are what are called must runs. I'll explain more about that in a second. They are forcing their local news anchors to tell you to not trust the news. That's amazing. This is one of the most audacious examples of propaganda I have ever seen in any country. So Deadspin did a wonderful job of splicing together the different local newscasts throughout the country. And again, remember, Sinclair owns more TV stations than anyone else in the country, and they're about to do a merger where they buy even more, 40 more stations. So this is the propaganda they're putting out all across the country. They make all of their anchors say this. Now watch.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trending irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Indeed, it definitely is. So we find out a lot of things through this one issue and how Sinclair has done this. And this is not the only issue that they've done right-wing propaganda on. I'll give you some examples in a second as well. Again, if you want to watch the full link and the full article, click down below to Deadspin's original article on this. They did a wonderful job with this. I can't commend them enough for putting that video together. So number one, we see political correctness here. Now, you might think political correctness is a term used to say that you shouldn't state offensive things. No, that's a twisting of the phrase used here in America by the right wing. Political correctness was something that was literal, and actually both the fascist Germans, otherwise known as the Nazis, and the Soviets under Stalin used the phrase political correctness. They would tell not only people in government, but people in news, you are not allowed to report what you think is factually correct. You must report things that are politically correct. So the government has an opinion, that is the correct opinion, and you will report it as such. There's never been a better example of it than what you just saw. Again, the right wing does projection. They accuse the left wing of political correctness, and the minute they have an opportunity, they define the phrase. They do it so over the top that you don't need any other examples of it. Okay, so it's political correctness, it's clearly propaganda, but there's a devastating second part that people are not talking about, which is that this exposes local news for the actors that they are. And unfortunately, that's true in all the TV stations. Burgundy will read anything put in the prompter. So you see, and that's why I call television news anchors news actors. We don't have a prompter here. There, they put it in the prompter, and sometimes it's real news people who work really hard, oftentimes it is, to produce a story and then put it in the prompter, and then the anchor reads it. A lot of those anchors worked in the past in the field and gathered up enough expertise to become anchors. Some of them just looked the part. And they got promoted up for a variety of reasons, right? But as you see that, you realize, oh, with the different intonations and the different delivery, the different acting schools they went to in a sense, and that's what these consultants at the local TV stations do. They come in and they teach people that are supposed to be in news how to act the news. And then some with the concerned faces, if you noticed. It is dangerous to our democracy. Now, don't get the wrong idea. A lot of the people who did this, they're not at fault. It's their bosses who literally ordered them to read it. And it is deeply embarrassing to them. But someone writes the script. In this case, it is this group that is admittedly right-wing and clearly supports Donald Trump. In other cases, it's other people writing the script. But what you see on television, unfortunately, is overwhelmingly fake. Now, more specifically to this problem, obviously, some people who worked at Sinclair and a ton of local news people, of course, have, because once again, they're the largest TV group in the country. And people who currently work there are deeply dismayed by what's happened. So first, let's go to Bill Mulligan. He used to work at Sinclair Broadcast Group. He now works at a different station in Los Angeles. He said, they were awful, and I would never work for them again. What they're doing now is ridiculous propaganda, and it's an embarrassment to the profession. I feel for my former colleagues being forced to read this garbage. So he is obviously very clear, but it's easier for him to say that because he doesn't get a paycheck from them right now. And you might think, oh, people on TV make a lot of money, and on cable news, they generally speaking do. But at local news, especially in the smaller and mid-sized markets, they do not make a lot of money. Ben Mankiewicz, who's on this show, started in local news and made $19,000 in his first job in Charleston, South Carolina. And that is not abnormal, and the prices have not gone up very much since then. And so it is hard for them to let go of that paycheck. It's easy for us sitting here to say they shouldn't do it, but then they are going to suffer economic devastation. And already their salaries are incredibly low in most of the markets that you just saw, okay? Now, let's go to a current employee at Sinclair. He says, it sickens me the way this company is encroaching upon trusted news brands in rural markets. As you can tell, I'm a little skeptical about the trusted news brands part. I think local news often does a lot of preposterous things, and I don't know why they speak the way that they do. The number of ambulances have doubled, but so have the number of accidents. Why are you talking like that? But for the people who did work hard, and there are plenty of them, there are thousands of people who worked hard and actually care about the news, and that's why they went into the profession. Now, in order to receive a check and to stay in your job, you must read this propaganda, and yes, that of course is deeply troubling. An anonymous local anchor continues that he feels bad because they're seeing these people they've trusted for decades tell them things that they know are essentially propaganda. Now, they literally had a former RT employee, a Russia Today employee, help with one of these stories on Sinclair that was then broadcast all throughout the country. They do two different things. One is they do these prepackaged pieces which they force the local stations to run. They own them, right? They're not really news, but they're put into the news shows. The second thing is they force the anchors to read them like you just saw in that video. Now, I don't care that they use a former RT employee, that's not that interesting to me. But in the midst of that, Newsweek reported that Columbia Journalism Review had described Russia Today as, quote, the Kremlin's propaganda outlet. Well, I've talked about this in the case of RT and Al Jazeera. People are right when they criticize them and say, hey, they're owned by Russia in the case of Russia Today, and Qatar in the case of Al Jazeera. And so you should be wary, especially if they're talking about those particular countries or their agendas. I think that both outlets have at times done very good journalism and at times have done propaganda, no question about it. Now, how about the people that own our stations? See, that's uncomfortable, so people don't like to talk about that. Do employees at Comcast support positions of Comcast? To say 99% of the time is probably a bit of an understatement. And the same is true of Time Warner and Disney and Sinclair. Now, in this case, is it fair to say that it is the US government, the Trump administration's propaganda outlet? Well, you just saw it with your own eyes. It's more than fair. So we throw a lot of stones in America at foreign outlets, and I understand why, and oftentimes I agree. But we should also be aware that we live in a glass house, and in the case of Sinclair, a very transparent glass house, as we all see now. Let me go to another Sinclair Broadcast Group employee. He says, this is about whether they have the option to run them or not. I mean, if you're under some illusion that these news anchors can say whatever they want, and if they see that copy, go, well, that's not really news, so I'm not reading it because I'm a news professional. Let me, unfortunately, get rid of that notion in your head through this employee that says that they have a quote from him or a memo from him, and here it is. He says, let me be absolutely clear here. These, and it's capitalized, all caps, must run. If they do not, my job is on the line. I don't say that to scare you by any means, but I do say this so you understand how serious Sinclair Broadcasting Group is about this project. Propaganda 101. Now, the boss is pleased, and of course by the boss in this case I mean Donald Trump, who they are serving. So Trump tweets out in their defense, so funny to watch fake news networks among the most dishonest groups of people I have ever dealt with criticize Sinclair Broadcasting for being biased. Sinclair is far superior to CNN and even more fake NBC, which is a total joke. Okay, well, this is ironic. Trump talks about fake news, tells his allies they should call other stations fake news. Sinclair does a report about how all the other media does fake stories to help Donald Trump. And Trump comes out and tweets and goes, well, look at how right Sinclair is. They're not the biased ones. You guys are the biased ones for running fake news. So it's a self-perpetuating propaganda cycle. And this is how brainwashing is done on a mass scale. Finally, I want to go to this report from Newsweek to give you context on what else they're doing. Among the must-runs, Sinclair forces on its stations are commentary from former advisor to President Donald Trump, Boris Epshteyn, some of Epstein's latest bottom line with Boris segments, including a story that criticizes the March for Our Lives demonstrations against gun violence, and a place on why the White House's high turnover rate isn't necessarily a bad thing. And the list goes on and on. Sebastian Gorka, one of the top defenders of the president, often goes and does these news segments on Sinclair Broadcasting Group. He literally did one on the deep state. So look, there are actual deep states in different countries at different times, but now there is a conspiracy theory among the right that there's deep state planning to do a literal violent coup of President Trump. Alex Jones says they're gonna drop a 2,000-pound bomb on the White House. So these kind of lunatic conspiracy theories, Sinclair Broadcasting Group puts in a nice little package, has the president's former advisors, Gorka and Epstein, read them, and then they put it into the news hours in all of those different outlets all across the country. It is getting the media to attack itself. It's almost a forced mass media suicide. And yes, over there it looked like a hostage video, but that is what they do. They read what's in the prompter. In the case of Sinclair Broadcasting Group, if you don't know which of your stations in your market is one, look it up. It's very easy to find out. Just Google it. You'll know which ones they are. And be wary of what they're reading off the prompter, because it was written by political hatchet men for Donald Trump. Okay. I suspect we're not going to get any deals with Sinclair anytime soon. All right, we move forward. So, does brainwashing work? The right wing attacks so many of the different things that bring you facts. The media, scientists, professors in their ivory towers, journalists, and now science itself. And the list goes on. Well, in the case of global warming, Donald Trump's been doing this a long time, even before he ran for president. Back in 2014, he tweeted out, this very expensive global warming, I don't know why that's in all caps. Anyway, this very expensive global warming BS has got to stop. Our planet is freezing, record low temps, and our GW scientists are stuck in ice. That was a news story back then. Was it true that we had record low temperatures across the world? No, not remotely true. If you look at the temperatures, that is not in dispute. There is an actual temperature reading that we all take, and I believe the hottest 10 years have been in the last 11 years. And I've shown you these charts over and over again. The temperature continues to rise across the world. So it is just demonstrably false, but that's never stopped Donald Trump before. In fact, back in 2012, this is where he invented the idea that it was a Chinese hoax. He said the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. So that is, of course, a lunatic conspiracy theory, but now the guy is president. So he keeps repeating it over and over and over again, and is it gonna work? That's what the thrust of this story. Well, I'll get you the numbers in a second, but now that he's president, he's actually putting all this into effect as well. Trump's administration has replaced or changed references to climate change or renewable energy on websites across the federal government, studies showed. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, recently omitted any reference to climate change, sea levels rising, and global warming from its 4-year strategic plan. So now that is political correctness on global warming. You're not allowed to say what is scientifically correct. You must say what is politically correct, which is what Donald Trump believes, which is that global warming is not true. Now, do they actually believe that, Donald Trump? Well, nobody knows what Donald Trump actually believes, including Donald Trump. But the Republican Party largely, of course, does not believe that, the officials. But they are paid through campaign contributions and eventually lobbyist jobs when they're out of office by the fossil fuel industry to put out this propaganda that they know is lies. Because unlike Donald Trump, most of the other Republican officials are not that dumb, and they see their campaign check coming in from ExxonMobil and the giant lobbying groups for oil and gas, and then they do as they are told, and they tell you, oh well, the temperatures might be rising. Some of them even deny that, but it's not man-made. Exxon told me it's not man-made. Now, in reality, as I've shown you in previous episodes, ExxonMobil, back when it was just Exxon, knew that climate change was real, it was gonna happen, and they've known it for decades and decades, and they covered it up. So, nonetheless, we have a political battle and debate in this country over things that are not debatable. They're facts. So let's look to see if it has gotten worse in the era of Trump. Well, Newsweek reporting here, just 35% of Republicans believe global warming was caused by humans, compared with 40% at about this time in 2017 when Trump had barely taken office. So like the ice caps, support for the idea that global warming is real is melting, at least among the Republican voters. So in just 1 year, he knocked it down from 40% to 35%. So people who previously thought that global warming was real heard Donald Trump say it isn't real, and they're like, well, I guess it must not be real then. I guess Donald Trump is smarter and a more stable genius than all the world's scientists. Well, I'm sad to report to you guys that propaganda does work. So now on the other end of the spectrum, among Democrats, a full 89% of Democrats, meanwhile, believed humans caused global warming. Now you could say, well, look, then you could say the Democrats are brainwashed because the Republicans believe one thing and the Democrats believe another. But the Democrats are, first of all, saying things that scientists are saying. It's like saying, well, you've been brainwashed to think that 2 + 2 = 4. Well, there's a pretty good reason for that, because it actually does equal 4. So you say tomato, I say science. By the way, that 89% number is not comforting. The reality is, as I'll show you, on average, 97% of the world's scientists say that not only is global warming real, but it is man-made. So actually, the number should be higher for Democrats. It's too low for Democrats, let alone Republicans. All right, now let's give you more context and more contrast between Republicans and Democrats. 33% of Republicans said they worried a great deal or fair amount about global warming in Gallup's 2018 environmental survey. That's the survey that I've been quoting throughout, down 3 percentage points from the year prior. 91% of Democrats were worried a great deal or fair amount. So it's just a different way of phrasing it. And I was actually heartened to find out that 1/3 of Republicans have not lost their mind yet. That's a little bit of a surprise to me. One more piece of context on that. 69% of Republicans thought the seriousness of global warming had been generally exaggerated, an uptick of 3 percentage points from the year prior. Only 4% of Democrats said global warming had been exaggerated. That's an amazing number. I'll come back to that 69% in a second. Some Republicans also doubted most scientists believe global warming is happening. Just 42% said most scientists believe global warming is occurring, down from 53% last year. So let's think about those two amazing numbers. Last year, 53% of Republicans think that at least scientists say that global warming is happening. Now, 11% of those folks, actually a higher percentage if you do the math, but 42% now go, yeah, I still believe that the scientists think that, although some of them don't believe the scientists. But that chunk in the middle there was like, I no longer think that the scientists are even saying it. Why? Based on what? Has there been a new study out that show you that scientists don't actually believe that? No, Donald Trump just kept saying it over and over again. So whatever Trump says, I believe. Dear leader says there's no global warming, then I don't believe it. And I believe all the scientists changed their minds. Look, I think that most of them have not spent a lot of time thinking about this issue. Certainly they have not spent a lot of time researching it. I hesitate to call people dumb. I think that's overused. I think that they're generally ignorant. And unfortunately, when you're in certain tribes and that ignorance is set in, it is incredibly easy to manipulate you. And look at that number. 69% of Republicans thought the seriousness of global warming had been exaggerated. 7 out of 10 Republicans looked at all the world scientists and said, scientists, what would they know? So let me show you what the scientists actually believe. This is from the publication Skeptical Science. They actually are quoting 7 different studies that studied all the other climate change studies. So these are meta studies and their conclusion of all of the research on this topic. Depending on exactly how you measure the expert consensus, it's somewhere between 90 and 100% that agree humans are responsible for climate change, with most of our studies finding 97% consensus among publishing climate scientists. And number 2 conclusion is the greater the climate expertise among those surveyed, the higher the consensus on human-caused global warming. So that's where you get the 97% number from. And depending on how you interpret it, it could be all the way up to 100%. But let's just stick with 97%. So finally, think about this. 7 out of 10 Republicans believe that 97% of the world's scientists are making it up. Scientists from Pakistan and Botswana and the United States and Venezuela and Finland and Japan, all across the world, all those scientists got together and decided, oh man, we're gonna prank the hell out of the whole world. We'll make up temperatures. We'll say all this the scientific method we were taught. We're just kidding, man. Let's do one giant hoax. Let's pretend that the temperatures are rising and that it'll have these effects. And then people will actually see those effects with their own eyes. Massive storms, massive fires, the droughts, etc. Man, we'll punk the hell out of them. If they thought about it for a second, I think that I'm hoping that a lot of them would realize how monumentally preposterous that is. But they don't think about it for a second. Whatever dear leader tells them is what they think.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired Magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
By the way, all of this comes back to money in politics. Because if the Republicans had not been bribed all along through campaign contributions by the fossil fuel industry, if we did not allow that, there's no reason why they would have done the propaganda in the first place. Because they're on the same planet as us. And the planet is melting. And it is endangering all of us and our families from here on out. But as long as they keep getting those campaign contributions and those legalized bribes, they're going to keep lying to you. And guys like Donald Trump are the masters at lying. And at the end of the day, that has convinced about 35% of the country and an overwhelming majority of the Republican Party that science is not real. That's the sad state of affairs in America today. Okay, I have to take a break. I have the amazing story of the Gaza Strip for you guys when we return. We'll be right back, guys. Thanks for watching what I hope was a lovely edition of the Young Turks. Now, you know that is 2 of the 5 segments that we do because that's free. We want to have you support independent media and come watch the whole show that we do every day. That's 5 segments overall, no ads at all. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Come become a member. Thanks for watching either way. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.